Order at 12:05 p.m. At this time, the committee welcomes any public comments. Issues or items that are not on the agenda may be raised by the public at this time. Citizens should speak from the podium, address all comments, begin by stating their name and address a single-member district number, and limit remarks to less than 3 minutes.
Good afternoon. My name is Alan Prest. I'm a former resident of single-member District Number 1. I resided in that district for 27 years. I now live in a small community outside San Angelo. But I'm still involved with animals, and that's why I'm here. I actually was in attendance in October when this group failed to achieve a quorum, and I'm here to say what I intended to say in October. And the city has two efforts underway that are important. One is economic development, and the other is becoming more accessible to people with disabilities. And I encourage this body to consider both of those groups. We have a number of employers that have large areas of land, Shannon Medical Center, Baptist Memorial, and Angelo State University. And when animals get on these properties, loose animals, at times they've gotten support from animal control, and at times they have not. And so employees who work at those organizations are forced to deal with, do I take this lost pet that I found at my workplace home? And that employee may or may not live in San Angelo. They may actually live in Ballinger or Wall or wherever. And some people that I've known that work at these facilities, because they haven't gotten support from the city, have said, I can't keep this pet, and they take it to another part of town and just dump it. And so I don't fault that individual who's having to make the best decision at the time. Matter of fact, Larry Miller asked that question way back when. He said, when I come across this pet and community sheltering is the answer, I'm going to have to make that choice. I mean, Mr. Miller said that. So I really encourage y'all to consider employers in a specific way. I don't believe the city wants employers to build kennels. I don't believe that's the intent of economic development. But if community sheltering includes employers with large tracts of land, then someone has to be thinking about how loose animals on on that property are taken care of. Angelo State's a beautiful university, a lot of space. Citizens walk through there. An elderly couple was walking their dog through ASU, and several large, I don't want to use the word aggressive, but intrusive dogs were bothering them, and they were in fear. They actually physically went inside a building and asked for people to get help. Now, ASU has a police force, so the police force is able to respond, and the police force has a relationship with animal control. So, but in this case, animal control was either occupied or the situation wasn't high enough on the list for a response. And so, so I can see my time's up, but the last thing I'll say is people with disabilities, we have to consider the 80-year-old lady who finds the dog, who a large dog wanders into their yard, and she does not feel safe bringing that dog into her house because of her frailty. And that has been those types of posts have been online as well. So I encourage you to consider people with disabilities, and I encourage you to consider employers. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
I have one item for public comment as well. We are launching a new resource for an animal services open house, where weekly, starting February 7th, each Wednesday from 5 to 6 p.m., the animal shelter will be staffed for questions, inquiries, concerns. We just want to give folks a venue to bring questions about programming or specific cases, or just to check out what we're doing. So starting February 7th at 5 p.m. and each subsequent Wednesday, we're going to be hosting an open house at Animal Services with myself and a variety of guests coming through, representative from field services, sheltering, and anyone else that wants to cycle through and just be available to speak to any folks that want to come and either learn more or ask questions or raise concerns.
Then I'll entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda as published.
Second.
I hear a motion from Victor. And,
All in favor?
I'll second that motion.
okay. Moving on to the regular agenda. First item is consider election of a chairperson and a vice chairperson to terms ending January 25th, or 2025. Sorry, go ahead.
Thanks. Sorry. This group, y'all are familiar with our practice. Each January, we select a chairperson and vice chairperson. Just for a reminder of where everybody's at, that we do have this lineup of membership. One update, committee members Murphy's term was renewed for her next term, so she is actually seated through January 2026. So that's just one update to this information.
Let's see.
You can entertain a motion.
Okay, anybody want to vote on chairperson, nominate? I'll nominate Victor for chairperson. Anybody second that?
I'll second that.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any nominations for vice chairperson?
I nominate Jen Murphy.
You can say aye.
That's fine.
Okay, I'll second that. All in favor say aye.
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 And if you want to take a vote on both of those together, you can. Because we've motioned and seconded, and so you can say all those in. Did we say aye?
Uh-huh.
Thank you for that.
Good. Okay, so next item is B, discussion and possible action related to monthly shelter numbers for October 2024. The presentation was made by Assistant Director, Neighborhood and Family Service, Morgan Chedwick.
So just to briefly report on our activity for October, we had 242 new arrivals there with animal services. 148 were dogs, 72 were cats, and the remainder were livestock and wildlife. 67 adoptions and rescue transfers, 73 pets redeemed by owner, so about average on those two items. We had 12 wildlife released, so a little low on wildlife. 55 deceased, which is a bit high for us. We had 44 euthanasias and 11 deaths. We did repeatedly hit capacity in October, but did have a number of folks stepping forward and assisting. We ended the month at a 73% live release rate. And then of the animals that were deceased, 15 were cats, 34 were dogs, and 6 were other. That is all wildlife that was injured. So another way to break that down is of the 55 deaths and euthanasias, 27 were sick or injured, 28 were due to aggression. We did have a lot of activity with impounding reactive dogs that were not adoptable. So we did have that reflected in our euthanasia records. So fiscal year to date, October 1st is the first of our fiscal year, so this is just reporting on 1 month of data, that with 35% of our animals left by return to owner. Again, a little low on wildlife with 5% released alive in that way, 31% animals transferred out. 0.5% adoptions, so the city reports any non-cat or dog adoption. So this will be any livestock, any fowl, and then any cat and dog adoptions are reported under transfers with our agreement with Concho Valley Paws. So that's why it's a little different there than reported in prior months. And then, so 26.6% of our animals were either died in custody or euthanized for the month of October.
Okay, so next item is C, discussion and possible action related to monthly shelter numbers for November 2023.
So for the month of November, we had 188 new arrivals, so a bit down from the prior month. Our dog intake was at 95 animals, so that's rare that it's under 100. 59 cats, so cats intake was down as well, and then 34 other. We had a lot more activity on wildlife this month. 76 adoptions and transfers, 65 owner redemptions. So again, about normal for those items. 28 animals were released alive, but still 49 deceased, and that was 37 euthanasias and 12 deaths. So a bit up from the prior month at 77% of animals released alive. Of the animals that were deceased, 21 were cats, 24 were dogs, and 4 were other. So quite a bit down on our wildlife. We were still seeing quite a bit of canine distemper in our wild canines, so raccoons specifically, and we did not see that in November. In subsequent months, you'll see that it is back up, and so there's no treatment for that. That is a euthanasia, but for November in particular, we had quite a low report on our sick wildlife. Another way to break that down, of the animals that died, we had 29 that were sick or injured, 20 that were aggressive. Of course, that would be all dogs. For the outcomes by type for fiscal year to date, so this is October 1st through November 30th, 35% of animals were returned to owner, back up to normal there at almost 10% were wildlife released, 33% were rescue transfers, so either paws pulling pets for adoption, paws facilitating rescue transfers to groups out of town. And then, so we were sitting for the year at 24% of animals deceased.
Okay, next item is D, discussion and possible action related to monthly shelter numbers for December of 2023.
So of course, we just finished the month of December. We had 158 new arrivals, and it is quite common that November, December, some even into January is our lower intake activity for animals. So of the new arrivals, 104 were dogs, 43 were cats, and 11 were other, including an emu. We had a fowl at large that was impounded in December. We had 88 adoptions or rescue transfers, which did include a good response from the community in Concho Valley Paws for 25 pets we placed on the euthanasia list in late December. So really proud of the activity there and our partnerships there. 52 animals redeemed by owner, so a bit low there. 5 animals were wildlife released, really hunkering down, not seeing a lot of wildlife activity in December. And 31 animals were deceased, 22 euthanasias, and 9 died. So we had 255 total animals left in custody, cats, dogs, and that 1 emu. So we ended the month at 82% of our animals released alive. So we're grateful to be back out of those 70s from October and November. And this is more in line with the activity that we saw in September, largely driven by, that big public support for that euthanasia list. Of the animals that died, we had about half cats, half dogs, and 6 other that was sick raccoons, again, by and large. Another way to break that down was 22 were sick or injured and 9 were aggressive dogs. So that puts us at fiscal year to date, so October 1st through December 31st, at 22% of our animals deceased, and the remainder live released. The bulk of that transfers out of 38% of our total outcomes.
All right. Then next is item E, discussion and review on animal services and challenges faced by San Angelo and other cities throughout the state or country.
This presentation was recently made at City Council on Tuesday, and so I did want this group to have the same information and the opportunity for the same dialogue and to be able to update y'all on the conversation and direction given. So this was an item requested by City Council members, largely because of media and news information that they were seeing in publications. And so in summary, the media then the articles that they were seeing were reporting largely a dog crisis, that we constantly struggle with space and capacity around dogs. We certainly do a lot of programming for cats, and I've mentioned, our other species, but today's presentation will be largely focused around dogs because that is the pressure point and the limitation that we're seeing with available resources there. And that's where the national media was really focusing, and that's what today's presentation will focus on as well. One thing that was reported nationally was that previously easy-to-move pets, like puppies and purebreds, were filling up shelters. And I'll talk more in a bit about, locally what we're seeing, but certainly puppies continue to be a large population of our daily inventory, and purebreds, unless you mean purebred large breed dogs like what we see, a German Shepherd looks like a likely purebred, huskies, and the good-looking specimens of pit bulls. When we see purebreds, we don't see the ones referenced in this national article. We're seeing those large breed dogs that are coming into our facility and in our intake. A group called Shelter Animals Count is reporting 250,000 more dogs sheltered this year than in prior years. Of course, with our capacity, we can only shelter so many pets. We can't have more than that. But they're also reporting adoptions down a bit and intake up at about 5%. But the bigger measure there is that their length of stay is reporting up nationwide, and that there are groups that had embraced no-kill or life first, or programming around facilitating the live release of pets, that for the first time in years they're considering euthanasia for space, and that's been so out of their vernacular for the better part of a decade that it was newsworthy to report.
So, on the length of stay, how long is the usual length of stay according to this national article? And then how long how much did it increase to? And then how does that really compare to ours?
So the length of stay, they didn't define like a best practices of length of stay. They just asked shelters and
Understand.
both private groups and public groups, is your length of stay more or less or the same this year than prior years? So if one, I love the Kansas City Humane Society and the work that they do, and they'll report length of stay up, and they'll say, well, we've had this dog, it's our longest stay dog, it's been here 60 days. So that's their normal, and that's what they're reporting, and so they would report length of stay up, whereas we, more rural shelters like us, 60 days is not uncommon, and is not our longest stay animal. So to not compare apples to oranges, so to speak, they simply said, is it up or down? So San Angelo locally, what we're seeing is the pressures on owners and their difficulty in maintaining pet ownership for that pet's natural life. And so, of course, we're all seeing inflation. We're all seeing the increases in cost and the expense to care for pets and really everything else in a family household. But most noteworthy is that dog food cost is up 16% compared to prior years. Does someone want to walk around? I'm sorry, the lights are motion sensor and y'all are delightfully still and watching attentively. Thank you. Dog food alone is up substantially. We see a lot of folks reaching out around restrictive housing, not having truly friendly pet housing where families are having to consider moving and want to keep their family together, but policies and rental agreements restricting breed or size of pet is a common reason for folks wanting to rehome their pet. And of course, we have a managed intake policy around owner surrender, where we ask folks to participate in some programming. If they join a wait list, if they participate in that, if they unfortunately have a pet that's at end of life or has, a bite history or anything like that, we do refer owners to euthanasia in those extreme circumstances. We also are at a constant capacity. So even once you join our wait list, we're weighing, this injured dog coming in, this stray dog coming in, this owned dog coming in. It's a constant balance. So those things together, just create a climate of limited resources, limited safety net programs where anecdotally, we're seeing folks simply leave their pets behind from their prior rental location. Owners simply letting their pets loose and then reproducing because we're not getting to them early and providing a solution early because we are limited and have only so much to offer. So there are a number of things that we recommended to the council, and I'll have them in summary in a minute. One of them, three of them are listed just there, that can we adopt some pet-friendly housing here locally? We're looking at launching a home-to-home owner surrender network where they largely police that and make those deals themselves, those transactions themselves, and then offering free microchips in target neighborhoods. And when we get to the end of the summary of all the things we asked for, I can provide those updates of where we are on each of those. And just, there's so much data to delve into, but I tried to pick the big ones to report on that, this national group is reporting that intake is up, and we're not seeing that, but we had a number of things changing all in 1 year. Fiscal year 22 is very different than fiscal year 23 because of our capacity policy, because of everything going on there. So our intake actually decreased from 4,000 animals taken in last year to 2,900 taken in this year. Our adoption and rescue transfers, which the national group is showing, down about 1%. We had 2,200 animals, and we report adoptions and transfers out because mid-year 2023, we made the transition that just anything under the PAWS umbrella leaves the city's umbrella and is outcome to PAWS, just a rescue transfer. So we really have to report adoption and transfers out together to compile that information accurately. So for fiscal year 22, we had 2,200 animals either adopted or rescue transferred. And then for 2023, we had just under 1,500 with the same outcome. And then, go ahead.
Thank you. Sorry.
So also reporting on field services, that's not something that the national group reported on, but it is a big issue that we are addressing and speaking to in San Angelo. So we worked over 6,000 cases in fiscal year 23. The 264 of those were animal-to-person bites. And just to speak to, over 6,000 cases, that's any animal services response. That's a call for dog at large. That is a call for allegedly cruelly treated animal. That's a case for checking on rabies vaccines, spay, neuter, that follow-up and case management we do when we have made contact with a resident. So it's any number of calls, and I'm sure you can imagine the vast majority, I believe over 4,000 were dog at large calls, or any kind of, caught stray dog, loose stray dog, dog at a school, anything like that. So of the cases worked In 2023, 264 were animal-to-person bites. The prior year, that was right at 150, so that's up 56%. And that is a metric that's concerning to us and that we want to address. We have asked for 2 additional animal services officers in the past, and we do think that that's the solution to speak to that. And of course, that's all animals that bit a person. So that could be wildlife, that could be cats, that could be your own pet, it can be a stray animal. Under any circumstance where any animal bit a person, that was a total of 264 cases. We're drilling more into that data. That is something that council was hungry for is, we talk a lot about target neighborhoods, that our target neighborhoods as defined by Neighborhood Family Services are where we see the most calls for service, the most dogs at large, the most non-compliance with spay, neuter, and other local ordinances. And so we're going to drill into, of those 264 cases, how many were in target neighborhoods, how many were repeat offenders, perhaps a dog that has bitten in the past and bit again in 2023, how many were owned pets in the home, biting a household member or visitor to the household, anything like that, or how many were just an animal at large, and what was the species of that animal biting. So we are getting more information on that to the council, and we'll get it to y'all as well.
I'd like to circle back to the 6,000 cases that you were talking about earlier. And there was 4,000 calls for dogs at large or animals at large. Were those necessarily like same groups of animals that were being reported multiple times, or?
There is some element of that.
I think another thing that is a little hard to also gauge of how many dogs are trying to do the home to the community sheltering that are diverted from the shelter through that program, which is a good goal. But is there a way that we can maybe start keeping a metric of that as a comparison to see, how many of those are reported and how many of those are actually kept in said program each month, just for data tracking to see if that's really one of the causes of some of the complaints that we're getting from citizens. And it'd just be a good way of at least having a metric to evaluate to see if practice changes have to be made. But that's really kind of where I'm at. It's more of trying to get a good number to know for data to make a good educated decision. I don't know if anyone else has opinions about that. I'm not advocating to go back to necessarily right now to go to full unregulated intake, but it's not the first time for people make statements about questions about dogs on hospital property and college campuses. So just something that just making a suggestion to let's maybe look at that as a way to be able to answer that.
Sure, and the data's there. It's just the volume of data, the number of cases. So when it's 6,000 cases for the year, it's a large amount of data to answer, how many are this, how many are that. And so we are adding, for our next meeting, we're adding to the monthly reports like I just did for October, November, December, that will add a component around field services. And we'll work through what makes sense for reporting for that. How many were dog at large? How many were bites? How many were cruelly treated animal? How many were impounds? How many were, and so I think we'll find our new normal for how we're reporting that. And it might be a bit clunky in the beginning while we're trying to delve out, how do we carve out the pie of thousands of cases. And so I think it's tackling it at the monthly level to be able to update folks more regularly, that one, we can pivot resources and programming and discussion to what we're seeing in those cases, but two, so that we can see a cross-section in any seasonality. You'll see month to month, we can have a lot of wildlife activity to not a lot of wildlife activity. Or we might see, and to some extent, that includes community cats, that they follow some of that same nature around seasons and their activity there. And so if we're seeing lots more animal-to-person bites for cats in April during, a higher season of reproduction, then we can do more outreach in community and social media posts and information on our channel about, walk away, don't engage, leave them be, any kind of wildlife or community cats to, decrease, some of these metrics or how to deploy that messaging and those resources.
Sure. And if you're just looking at calls to service, you could just break it down into several categories, not even large ones. You don't have to have super specifics. You can just put a check mark on a list. And because, as you said, 4,000, 6,000 cases is an extreme amount of paperwork, especially for the current level of staffing.
So we also updated the council a bit on the facility that we had originally planned to break ground in November of 2023. And of course, we are delayed. We have significant engineering challenges that the folks ran into. So we're working closely with our mechanical engineers on all of the systems that are going in place, that just the investment we're making in plumbing, HVAC, that those are quite involved. And so we did have an update that we are now looking at breaking ground April, May of 2024 to be done in November of 2024, and standing up of the temporary facility, which services and animals will stay in the existing facility versus what will be launched at the temporary facility. All of that will be rolled out to the public and y'all, so that you know what's going on and what to expect. We are phasing it out so that we will maintain ownership of the shelter for the duration. So for example, my office, admin, field services, the front counter where so much happens will stay at the current site for the duration of the project. And so carving out, which movements of which populations so that everybody has what they need to get services and also to do their job will be forthcoming. We do think that there's going to be some additional expense into standing up the temporary facility, and so council asked for that information. So that's part of this staff recommendation of what we asked for was that information. Also adopting something around pet-friendly housing, encouraging local adoptions. The home-to-home surrender portal is the one that I'm looking at. It's not a cost to the city, and we can be as we would prefer to do it where we're very hands-on, and so that we're seeing where the animals are going. We know that they are current on all state and local requirements. We know that that's happening in a really responsible way, but because of the amount of dogs at large we're seeing, the amount of households that are in crisis that we're seeing, we just need to launch something to get an additional resource out there so that when folks make their first request to us, we have something to refer them to additional. And so council was of course supportive of that. We also asked for the funding around field services to fund 2 additional animal services officers and to fund microchips in target neighborhoods, which can of course be done at any level of funding. Even $2,000, a pretty affordable expense to something like the general fund, can go towards 300 microchips, 300 households potentially to be served with our microchip that is with no fee to implant, no annual fee, no fee to update any information if somebody leaves, a local office that is at Animal Services if anybody moves or needs to update contact information, that it's a really accessible resource to keep updated. And so the council was largely in support of all of these items and asked for the fundings to be presented in a way that was prioritized of if they had to pick and choose which to fund first or which to table for a future conversation. And so staff is in process of communicating that to finance and management for council's further direction. But they were largely in support of what we're experiencing and what we need to kind of address those things that are at a crisis level.
On the temporary shelter housing, I know currently, and this is just a question I know will be asked, because currently people, when they come to the shelter, if they have a missing pet, they're allowed to walk through the kennel space to see if their pet's in the kennel. Are y'all going to try to find a way that they can possibly do that at the temporary location as well?
Yes, we're also looking at keeping all recent arrivals. So most folks, when they're looking for their pet, they reach out in the first few days of that pet's absence.
Yes.
And so we would prioritize keeping recent arrivals at the shelter. One, we're really confident in our management of disease control in the shelter in its current setup, and the temporary facility does not have all of those accommodations. So we will prioritize keeping new arrivals on site at the shelter for both of those reasons. If someone has been missing their pet for several weeks and it may have graduated to the temporary facility, then yes, there will be accommodations or hours or some resource for those folks to see it. We also are really cognizant of the impact that has to adoptions, right? That a person walks in, they want to see an adoptable pet. It makes so much sense to keep the adoptable pets co-located where the adoption coordinators are, which is right next door to the current facility. And so there will be, a cohesive effort working closely with PAWS about how to show those animals, how those animals are available. Of course, they're always available online. Someone looking for their pet, making the sometimes 6-10 mile trek to Animal Services is cumbersome in their day. And so they're always listed online. But if there is a pet they've seen online that they want to make sure is their pet, we want to communicate specifically which site that pet is at so that nobody wastes their time driving out to the shelter, then back to the temporary facility. And we want to avoid, as much headache around that as we can. So that is certainly, both of those items are ones that we are looking at being very clear and intentional about how we handle. Okay. Yeah, you can say you have questions from the.
That concludes all regular agenda items. Do we have any follow-up or administrative issues to announce? Any other questions?
You can say we're opening it for public comment.
We're open for public comment. Yeah, come on up.
I apologize for interrupting, but I thought that public comment was going to be offered. I was going to be offered that opportunity, but thank you for allowing me to do this. Y'all talked about on the slides that more dogs are being sheltered nationally. Locally, ours is 1,000 less. Adoptions are down 1% nationally. Locally, our adoptions are down 50%. I was able to get that information from the city. It was like 1,100 in the fiscal year before, and it was 500 and some this last fiscal year. Length of stay, I didn't really hear an answer. Dr. Schultz asked a very good question about length of stay, but I didn't hear a real answer on how that compares nationally to local. Intake nationally is up. Intake here is down. We talked about dog bites being up. And in the October meeting on the agenda was the number of loose dogs in the community. And the audience was full for that. And one gentleman was really passionate about speaking. And he said, I live just outside of town, and people are dumping dogs where I live left and right. And he wanted to talk to somebody here about the shelter's restrictive policies. Now, certainly not everybody goes to the shelter and tries to surrender their dog. Not everybody does that. Some people go straight out of town and dump it. But other people do try to do the responsible thing. And when they can't get help, I mentioned my friends who worked at those facilities, Baptist Memorial. 4 dogs running around Baptist Memorial. That person corrals them. The city won't take them. She already has a house full of pets, dogs and cats, and she can't afford to take care of the ones she has. So what does she do? What is she in a position to do? And I encouraged her to talk to her boss. I know Aaron. I mean, he's the head of Baptist, and I encouraged her to share that with Aaron, and I encouraged Aaron. I mean, I didn't personally talk to Aaron about it, but I encouraged her to share that with him and encouraged Aaron to have contact with the city, because this employer thing is not new, as Dr. Schultze was kind enough to reemphasize. So I just heard a number of things in this discussion that are concerning. Obviously, y'all have changes in mind, and I applaud changes in mind. I applaud a prioritized list. But I also heard in the city council meeting a desire for a town hall where people of all levels of investment can come. And I don't believe a weekly open house is the same thing as a town hall. Recently, in Concha Valley homepage, a local veterinarian talked about increases in dog-on-dog attacks. We talked about increases on dog-on-people bites. I mean, so to me, it paints a concerning situation. And I just wanted to reemphasize that. Y'all are concerned. We're concerned. The community's concerned. I want as many veterinarians to show up at this town hall as possible. I want people from local rescue groups to show up. I want y'all to get the best information you can, because that's what's going to help us make the best solutions. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Circle back around to that one. Administrative.
Yeah, we can.
Hi, I'm Jenny Wilson with Concha Valley Paws. I just wanted to make a brief public comment. As Morgan mentioned when she was going through the slides, Concha Valley Paws is excited that our facility is now opened. And in doing that, we've made some changes to how we are reporting numbers. And I think that that's really important for y'all to understand. And what we would like to do, because now we have our own facility with our own residents that we have to maintain medical on and so forth. We have our own separate database from what the shelter has of their residents. So the shelter is transferring animals over to us, and then they're residing at our facility through to adoption. So with that being said, it can look very misleading. Our adoptions may be down a small amount, but it is not a significant 50% decrease. I think you're missing a couple of months of true adoption numbers on here because of the number of animals that are transferred over. Doesn't constitute the number of animals that are actually adopted. We also have people that are participating in our Second Chance program, which are people that are referred to Concha Valley Paws for services from the shelter, especially if they own a pet, for them to responsibly rehome that pet. And so those adoptions are not reflected in this number. So what I would like to do is, beginning at your next meeting, submit the first quarter's numbers to Morgan for her to report back to y'all and to share with the community so that you get a very clear picture of the activities that are happening at Concha Valley Paws and the number of programs and the effort that is going into addressing all these issues, including the number of animals that we're spaying and neutering through our voucher program, if y'all would allow that. But our facility is open. Our Stevens dog dorms are finally open, and I invite you to come out. At a later date, we will be announcing a grand opening and dedication ceremony, but we would love to see y'all come out and see what we have going right next door to the shelter. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
And just a follow up on that, if that is, I would like to see those numbers, but But can we also, when we do that, make sure we cross-reference of how many of those, make sure that we equal out on that, just to make sure it's apples to apples when we're coming out, and then looking at the second chance as addition on that part, so that we know, so we can show if there is a good alternative diversion to housing that we are currently have options for. That would at least show some progress to citizens as well. And then I think another part of that is I would also encourage and welcome any other adoption agencies if they would like to participate in helping with transfers out of the shelter to be in a in good spirits about cooperating with one another, and not having pride, as I think there are some issues with that. So it's really about not having euthanasias and having positive outcomes, and that's really the whole goal of this committee. So that going forward, I think that's kind of where I think we should be working on, is just working on making the positives the best and not focusing on the negatives. Any other comment on that?
Well, just to answer to the length of stay, because I apologize, I did miss that our fiscal year 22 average length of stay was 66 days, and for fiscal year 23, it was 36 days. So we're not seeing that up like the national groups are, but we also did have that major shift in reporting in fiscal year 23, where we the city and Concho Valley Paws kept their animal inventory together on the same database. And so if an animal went to foster, which could be quite long because of advanced medical, because of nursing a litter of puppies, and so that could show a much higher length of stay. So by showing our average length of stay for San Angelo Animal Services for 2023 was 36 days, comparing it to the prior year really isn't, again, apples to apples, because we had that big shift in reporting our animal inventory. So that is the report on length of stay, with the asterisk that there's so many changing parts. Comparing us to fiscal year 24 and moving forward, this will be our new normal, but that is our average length of stay for fiscal year 23 was 36 days on site at the shelter.
Okay. Okay. Do we have any follow-up or administrative issues to announce?
No.
Okay. Then I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
A motion to adjourn.
I'll second that.
Meeting adjourned at 12:52 p.m.